Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Webinar. My name is Eric Bobrow, and today is Thursday, June 18th, 2020. My special guest is Van Hohman, Los Angeles area architect. How are you doing, Van?
I'm well, Eric. Thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Great to reconnect with you after a while. We've known each other for, well, certainly at least 20 years. We got started with ArchiCAD back in late 90s, we figured out. Let's see if everybody can hear us. So go ahead and type into the questions panel to let us know that you can hear and see our faces. We haven't shared anything on screen yet other than our webcams. And also say where you're calling in from. It's always fun to know that. So I see Brett from Australia, Henry, Rick from Tokyo, Nicole from Berkeley, just across the way, Goran from Slovenia, Richard from Bermuda, Utah, Greece, Maine, Arkansas. All right, London, Vancouver, Colorado. Yep. All right, we've got like 78 people in the room, and I'm sure it'll go up quite a bit in the next few minutes as people arrive. So, Van, I've always wanted to have you on ArchiCAD User because you played a very important role in my development as a user and a trainer. And I shared this in the email, your demonstration at the ArchiCAD User Group back probably around 2004 or so, which was an eye-opener. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your firm, your background in architecture, and what your main focus is.
Well, my firm is currently me, so here we are. I started in architecture as a builder. I grew up as a builder with my dad, and went to architecture school in the 80s and went to work for a very small firm with an architect that was mainly a one-man shop. He had one other person that he had added, and we did everything by hand because that's all we had back then. And I was with that firm and became a partner in that firm and carried it into first CAD, then ArchiCAD until 2010, when I decided that I needed to be able to make architecture more accessible to more people. We did a lot of custom homes, a lot of affordable housing apartments, which was great. It just cost a lot of money to do. And I did a house for my closest friend, and he couldn't afford us. He just couldn't afford us. And so, you know, he bought me a bottle of wine, and I had dinner at their house a few times. And I said, we should be doing this. We should treat everybody like they're our neighbor, especially when the economy was crashing. So I created the Architect Next Door, with the theory being that everybody would be like my neighbor. And if my neighbor could afford it, they pay for it. If they can't, they won't. And for the first few years, I took very little money. I just wanted to keep busy. People paid me what they could afford to. Some people paid more than I asked, and some people didn't pay at all. But it allowed me to keep busy, to keep driving, because I am not an architect as a job. Architecture is who I am. An architect is who I am. So I have to keep doing it no matter what. I had thought about retiring because, you know, I'm getting a little creaky, a little old, and I just can't. I can't put it away. So I'm starting to grow it again and build the firm back up again and move forward. But I still want to go with that same belief, same philosophy. The other firm is still there. My name is still on it. It's still Fonda Bernardi and Hohman, but it's run by my former business partner. And if you need someone in Santa Monica, call him. He's spectacular. That's it. That's who I am. That's, you know.
All right. Well, I'll make you presenter so you can start showing some things on screen. So get this here.
Okay. So I need to tell it to show the screen.
Okay, and so there's your website, The Architect Next Door, and Yeah, I love the philosophy, and I know you have you're fortunate in that you have income from properties that you own and manage, and so you're not as reliant on the architectural income as most of our users are.
Yeah, I don't like to say that because then people look at me funny, but no, I don't practice architecture to make a living. I practice architecture because I love it, although it supported my family for years. But it certainly wasn't to make a living. It was to create spaces and meet people, connect with people, and help people. I will say it's what's changed in my setup and in the way I run the office is when I first met you, Eric. We were a small office. I think there were 4 of us, but I had to make the system of ArchiCAD work for everybody in the office, including my business partner who got his architectural degree using a slide rule. So calculators were odd, let alone computers or CAD, or more importantly, BIM, which it wasn't called yet. But you hooked me when you told me if you make a change to the window in the plan, it changes in the elevations and changes in the schedule. And I went, oh, boom. And so I was really draconian about setting up these rules that everyone in the office had to follow so that we were all working with the same toolkit. I couldn't, have someone pick something up and show a framing plan differently than we were showing it because that's how they thought they should do it. Now, over the last 10 years, it's been me. So I've gotten a little lazy. So talking to you has gotten me back in the swing of things. That's really the main reason I went back to using your template as opposed to my old template because they're so similar, but you stay on top of it, which is much better than I can do. So
Right.
what would you like me to cover?
Let's take a look at one of your projects. I know you've got 3 of them to share, so I want to bring up one of them and just tell us briefly what the 3 projects are, and then we'll dive into one of them.
I'll quickly cover. There are 3 here. 2 are construction drawings. One is starting construction drawings. It's the most interesting of the 3. It's a large house in Studio City. But the other 2 are kind of what we're running into nowadays. They're, especially when the economy is slower. One is an ADU that's attached to a garage. And it's a fun little project to work on fitting all that into a tiny space. And the other is actually a garage conversion, which I use these to allow me to get back into really working ArchiCAD to the way I need it. So why don't we start with the simplest, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And while you bring that up, so I just want to greet some more people who've come in from Glasgow, Scotland, and Italy, and London, and Newcastle, and Rick Skorick asked, are we using Slack? So those of you who are in the ArchiCAD training programs that I offer, you can communicate on I guess we'll use the coaching call channel in Slack. For those of you who are not part of my training programs, of course, just use the GoToWebinar questions area. Slack is nice because if you do make comments or questions, other members can see it, whereas in the GoToWebinar one, only I can see those questions. So if you want to use Slack, Rick and other course members, you can use the coaching call channel. And separately, I want to give a special welcome to Scott Bulmer. Scott is an architect also in the LA area. We worked together quite actively for quite a few years, and he was the person who put together MasterTemplate based on sort of my spec. We discussed sort of the ways to develop the best template we could think of that we could create at that time, and definitely took the ideas that Van you're going to be showing us and put them into practice. So if we can, I will get Scott to come on the line. Scott, if you have a microphone, just be prepared. I might ask you to talk. And anyway, Scott just wrote, "You are so funny." So I'm not quite sure if. All right. So.
Okay, so my template is really it's not anything groundbreaking anymore. It was years ago. I really needed to be able to stay consistent and to stay quick, especially as a one-man show now, where and measuring is so fast now. We're all measuring with lasers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm in a house for an hour and I've measured the house. That gets ported into Magic Plan, which shows up on my computer as a DWG, and I get to the office and there it is. And I needed ArchiCAD to be that fast. Now, some of these things I've been using almost unchanged since 2000. Some of my, I gotta move this out of the way so I can see. You may find me going up to the top up here. I recently pulled everything, the toolbar over to the side. Had to do with the monitor I had. But I still use favorites for certain things. I'm certain framing things I use over and over again, certain floor plan things, site stuff like the site text and everything. But when I pull up a file, it's a big blank thing with this piece here that's highlighted and elevation markers and section markers. But it also has, as I'm showing over here, it has all the layouts set up, as well as all my views. So this little job took maybe an hour to measure. And she just wanted to convert her garage. And I used it as a chance to really get my hands around how to currently make this work as quickly as possible with the newest tools. So I break this down. I've got my construction documents, and this is really, I think, minorly changed from Eric's template. I've added a few more elevations and sections and things, but it just zips through real fast. I come in and do a quick demolition, and then I lay in the floor plan. While I'm doing all of this, it's creating the sheets. So I've got a title sheet that has views in it. They're empty when I start. It has the place for the site plan. Obviously, depending on your site, this sheet may change. This particular one was small enough that I also, because I was going to be doing Title 24 calcs, put in all the existing glazing. Again, that's just taken right off of the model. I actually, for my maps, I go straight to Google Maps. I find the address, I do a screenshot, and I drag it right into here. I also start with some worksheets, and every job starts with me dragging in either, this particular one is straight from Zemus, the LA City site, their plan, or I brought in the aerial view from Google Maps, which helped me lay things out. It is not, I then will go back and measure to check things out as far as the site, but so it's not that I'm relying upon that, but it's a great way to get ahead. And this job, in fact, when we go to 3D, you'll see that I stitched that aerial photo onto the mesh that is the site, and allowed me to see that I was in the right place.
Go ahead and bring up that 3D view. That would be, nice just to see it in the context that you.
Let's go to model. I'll just pull any 3D view up and we'll just zip over there. That's inside. So that is, if I zoom up, that's Google Maps. And this is stitched right onto a mesh and scaled in. And it was great. I did it after the fact, and I was pretty darn close with laying out the site. This doesn't have to be a perfect model throughout because I'm literally just dealing with this space right here, right? So they care about, can they get their drums in there? Can they get their laundry in there? What's the lighting like? Things like that. Anything else you want to see on this, Eric, before I go back?
We'll just take a real high aerial view because right now, of course, it doesn't look very, it doesn't communicate very well, but I imagine if you're taking a top-down view or a very high-angled view, that it would sort of look like the building in context.
Yeah, when you get all the way up, it does, especially if I got all the way over it. There you go. We can have the street the right width. So
Right.
the laser tape works. So there you go. There's the context of the building within the neighbors. That makes sense?
Yep, absolutely. So that's now it actually seems like it's usable.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, do go on with the file structure. Now, you used to start with a little building off to the side and eyedrop things and copy and paste them. And I know in MasterTemplate we have a somewhat different approach, but it's based on that. Are you using the MasterTemplate interactive legends,
I
or
use a template, absolutely. Let's see, let me get back to where I'm supposed to be to get started, sorry. So I use this a lot, and I live in this zone here, residential rooms. That's interesting. Some of the stuff is missing. And so I do a lot of option clicking off of these and dragging things in. I have in the walls, instead of using that, I have some walls I use all the time. So I'll actually start putting a wall in, and then I'll pick the composite that I want. And I get really specific with these because especially nowadays that we're really tightening up these buildings energy-wise, we're getting into these details with new assemblies, with the zip system or with exterior insulation, and the builders just are having a nightmare right now. They keep telling me, "What is this? I've been doing this for 40 years. I've never had to do this."
you showed me an interesting 3D cutaway when we were, meeting just ahead of this session. That in this project?
That is in this project right here. This is the little ADU, and those cutaways are, let me find my 3D views. There we go. So standard 3D views, I do things like having the front porch, or on this case, views that I used to show them. I used to do renderings all the time. I show them these because this much is done in a day or two, and I don't want them, I don't even put them in sketch format. I don't want them thinking it's too easy. But in this little thing, in Los Angeles, insulation has changed from R11 insulation in the walls to R13 insulation in the walls. Now they want R13 insulation in the walls plus R10 outside. This is the one they let me go with R6 outside. And the builder just couldn't understand this new stuff. So I created details for him that are 3D. So this is the zip sheeting on the roof, the zip sheeting on the wall, which has the insulation as part of it. We showed the tape. We zeroed in so he could see how I want this to run all the way up through the blocking and keep the envelope sealed. And then I stepped him through it. I then added wood for the rain screen. Then we added the roof and added on the eave as a boxed in eave. So that the insulation went right through. I will tell you this, he still came back to me and said, "I need more information. I don't understand what that is." We blew up the detail for an outrigger and how I wanted it built, all 3D. We're doing a lot of this now. And it's based upon the model. In this particular case, because I wanted to be able to blow it up and show different stages of it, I actually pulled a copy of the model to the side and worked over here on those. But that's how we're using 3D to get details across, and they are in the plans. They are in, let's see if I go to my structural. So you have your regular plans with, framing plan, foundation plan, details of eaves and, shear transfer and footings. And then I blow up details that I want him to understand in 3D because they just are not getting it in 2D. And that's fine. It is a constant battle to learn what language you need to speak, depending on what builder you're working with or who the owner is. And this one works for most people. He was still struggling with this, so I haven't figured this one out. Okay. And again, these are all, you're all ArchiCAD users. You all have all your different views. You know, one of the things I've recently learned, or had to relearn, is I always did my electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and structural with what I call background or base sheets. We used to actually have base sheets and we drew over them. And I had not spent enough time on graphic overrides. And I finally figured, I know, the guy really knows this stuff real well. Hadn't spent enough time on graphic overrides, but I hadn't. And I finally, you know, started getting into realizing I had to change the way the walls looked, and because I work with composites and where you can see all the assembly, I changed it for these now so that when you look at these over here, these are all actually two drawings, right? There's a background and then there's the mechanical laid over it or the electrical laid over it.
So let me stop just to explain for those people who might miss your quick explanation. So graphic overrides are a way introduced in ArchiCAD 20, I believe, to change the way things look. They override the graphics. So in this case, making the walls have just a single fill, a poche, a light shade, as opposed to all the detail that would be in the main floor plan and of course the sections, etc. So that's one thing. Now you also used a feature here in terms of on the sheet, and we're seeing right now, we're zoomed in on a layout sheet. You've got two different drawings placed in that area. Now, sometimes that's useful. I'm not sure in this case whether you could have done it all in one drawing or not, but the point is, what you did was you had one drawing with a particular graphic override and another drawing that was isolated with different settings. And so that is one way to do that. Can you just select each of the drawings just so we see?
And I'll explain to you my thinking behind the fact that there's two of them. So this is the actual, if I move this, that's the electrical plan. And then this, which has no title on it, is the background.
Yeah, so hold on. There are two drawings there, but only one has a title. So from a printed perspective, it just appears to be one drawing, but there are actually two views, each played, and of course synchronized, just placed so that they match exactly where they should align.
Yes. And the reason I went to two, you could do this by, because I don't want to do anything more than once. So I've got my walls done the way I want them with the pens I want, which I've lightened up recently. So because all these layers that are going to these walls, these vapor protection, water protection, air protection, thermal protection, and structural protection take up a lot of space in a composite, and they're hard to read. So I've gone thinner, but it also means they're busier. And this way I can take that exact drawing in a different view over here, right? And give it different graphic overrides as well as different document settings. So it's the exact same drawing. I'm not drawing anything twice. I just have a different view of it.
Okay, so that is something that, you know, I might explore with you, Van, because sometimes it is required to have two different drawings, but other times you can use a graphic override and just select, for example, that you want to work on walls that are on particular layers. And that's one particular override, and it doesn't affect anything else in the drawing. Sometimes you can combine these, but you've got an efficient system there. It is literally just placing two drawings on top of each other, setting one of them to not have a title, and use the view settings for each one. And that's partly an answer to Mackenzie Lifest's question. Why wouldn't you just use layer combinations to toggle the layers, etc.? Now, Brett Turner asks about your window schedule. Did you display the face direct north, east, west? So I didn't actually notice. You must have had your window schedule up.
see, where is that on my sheet? It's on my floor plan sheet. Yeah, hang on. I did not do face. I have an exposure, northeast, south, or west, obviously, but I'm not using the direction it's facing. I was not able to get that to work on this job. I'm sure I can. I'm sure, Eric, you could help me. But I just put that in there for Title 24.
Okay, so you've got the exposure put in as a manual, just typing it in. Of course, for a tiny project like this, it's no big deal. But yeah, in general, you should be able to get data automatically for that, as long as you set your project north correctly, which is easy.
Yeah.
So we can look at that. So anything else? I'm wondering if there's anything else that's you have. So you have your manufacturer in there, the material, etc., and the type. So are you using the parameters within the library part, or are you using the new properties?
I'm using the properties.
Okay.
So if we go, and I did that for a few reasons, but everything is in one place now. So if I go here, I can go down to properties on this window, and I can go to, schedules. And I know that I can change, again, I would have to, if I'm working in a larger office, I would have to make this more automatic, but I can then go in and put in the information I need to. There's where I have the exposure, the manufacturer, the glazing, everything is here. And yeah.
So just another clarification, since I like teaching while we do these interviews. So Graphisoft has provided for, for decades, the ability to do schedules with data that's built into the library parts. In recent years, with the properties capability, you can now customize your own data fields that you can put into schedules. And so using the properties, you can reorganize the ones down in that area that Van was showing, add your own properties, and you don't have to worry at all about the library part definitions. So if you create your own custom window, can easily have that same information that goes into the schedule. So that's under the property manager.
Yes. Right here's property manager. That's exactly the biggest reason. I don't have to have a certain window or door or light fixture.
Okay. Yeah, Brett thanked me for asking you to expand on that. So that's great. All right. So let's carry on. So when you start a project, you'll go, well, typically you're doing remodels or additions these days. And so you're going and doing a site survey. Now you said that you were using a tool that brought back to the office a DWG file. Is this like an iPad tool that allows you to quickly get the basic data?
iPad or iPhone. It's an app called Magic Plan.
And Magic Plan?
Magic Plan. And it will communicate with these certain ones of these distometers. This is not the one that works with it. And it allowed me, so when I say it works with it, as you measure or put the measurement into the room, the newer versions of these with the newer iPad Pro, which has the LiDAR sensor on it, is much better at actually getting the dimensions right on its own. So you use it and you get the corners of the room and you say you're done, then it says tilt up to show the height of the room. And then it says point to the windows and doors, and it does all that remarkably accurately, certainly accurate enough for, say I'm measuring this entire house, but I'm only working on 2 rooms of it. I will still measure by hand everything that I'm going to be touching because, they say if it's off by 2 inches, it doesn't matter. But as architects, that does matter. Right.
Okay. So this is called Magic Plan?
Magic Plan. I've used it for years. And
so when you end up with this data, it does a sort of a simple schematic level model with just room sizes and openings specified. And then it will export that in DWG, which of course we can bring in to ArchiCAD as a background for just snapping your model on top of. Does it actually sort of integrate with taking photos, so you can take photos of certain conditions and have like it indicate that there's a link, you know, in this corner there's a photo?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll pull it up real quickly.
Absolutely, this is great because this is the sort of thing that I think a lot of people could benefit from, and I imagine it's a relatively inexpensive little app.
It is. Interestingly enough, it's
Well, you're probably logging into it on your iPhone or your iPad.
yeah, no, but I logged into it on here because it shows up on here. It's web based, and it shouldn't. Can I temporarily turn off my camera so I can look at my password, or just
Yeah,
matter?
sure.
Hang on a second. I'm still here.
Well, actually,
Oh,
we're
I'm still
not
sharing.
seeing you anymore, but okay,
There you,
there you go. All
I'm
right.
new. Hang on a second. Magic plan.
So while we're going and Van's figuring this out, how many of you are using tools like what Van describes to do measurements? And as a separate note, in the age of COVID-19 and the fact that you know, it's becoming more challenging sometimes to do site visits, maybe this is going to be receding, you know, soon enough, but I think for a while we're all going to be having some issues. There's been some discussion in my other business, Architect Marketing Institute, how to help clients actually do their own measurements for initial concept work. So if they're saying, we're thinking of doing X, you know, how do you get an as-built set of drawings from them that's usable enough so you can at least talk about the feasibility of doing things. You can do some initial concept work, even though it won't, you can't rely on their measurements. So just curious if those of you who have comments. So I see Ann Callender says, I'm using a Matterport camera. So I'm not sure what that does, but I imagine that camera has some capabilities, special ones. All right, so here's Magic Plan, yeah.
So this, you do each room, you measure each room, you can draw them, you can make them in a rectangle and modify them. They're very quick, it's all done by touch. And then it pieces them together. You give it the wall width and it pieces them all together. So these are all individual rooms, right? And any one of these, it should allow me, there it is. If I took any pictures of anything in that room, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as well as any notes. So this document that came up, that's great. Hang on. Internet's not being nice. The document that came up, the plan that came up, comes to me as a DWG also. So I pulled that onto a worksheet and work right off of that. But it's a 3D model. You can look at this thing in 3D and spin it around. For whatever reason, it's not happy with, I don't know if my network is slowed down. Anyway, keep going.
Okay, all right. Well, you showed us enough to definitely whet my appetite or make me curious about it. So, all right, so that's so you bring that in, and then you're going to use your kit of parts, nowadays MasterTemplate, to quickly build up a model. At what point do you start adding in all the detail, like what you showed, the 3D cutaway? Is that something that you wait and only do it in areas that you need to, or are you working with composites and complex profiles pretty quickly?
I work in composites and complex profiles right away because it helps me to see it as something real. There are times I will show you a plan that I was working on for my own house, and I did a lot of that with just solid walls because I didn't want to start thinking about details of, you know, nailing and flashing and stucco, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to think about the abstract of the space, but I do work in those pretty quickly. I also work in 3D right away with sending most of my stuff to my clients is either movies or 3D renderings or 3D sketches, because none of them, and I will say none of them, really understands 3D from a 2D drawing. None of them do.
Now you were mentioning sharing movies. Do you have any samples of your movies? Movies don't tend to show up very smoothly, excuse me, on a webinar, but it does. We do get certainly glimpses of the still shots along the way.
No, I have still shots. The movies, that was why I signed up for the VR class.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have time to do. Early movies were just too jumpy for me. So most of what I do is 3D views. What it actually means they're either fully rendered or I do a lot of work with those 3D documents. They look
Well, you
pretty
showed us the 3D documents, at least a few of them. Can you show us some of the, the views that are a little bit more rendered up to this point? Right now, by the way, we're seeing your website up in front of ArchiCAD.
Okay, well, let's put it behind ArchiCAD. And let me see.
Yeah, now we're seeing ArchiCAD again.
Yeah, so hang on a second. Let me get to my 3Ds. I'm not sure if this one has a lot of them. They are certainly, what's interesting about these is they're all, this is why I like the 3D views. You can take any one of these, right? And you can, where is it? 3D, you know where it is.
Are you talking about just going into you were talking about rendering it, or are you talking about?
No, I wouldn't be for rendering it. So I could go to these and just change the settings, and I tend to do that, but I usually have more than one where you could just say, no, I want it to have its own color, so own surface, usually not shaded, and then boom, you've got color. These tend to be so cartoonish, but the clients seem to like it. The stuff that we've always wanted to do as architects, make it very photorealistic. What happens, I find, particularly in design, let me just jump back while we're doing that. Particularly in design, I find that when I get too realistic, even with color, they start thinking about things like the finishes long before they should be. So they'll look at that siding that was up there and go, do they have that with a little more yellow in that brown? And I'm like, wait, let's not talk about that yet. So I stay away from a lot of the photorealistic up front. I deal a lot with these types of views, or a quick photo, or if I was, the other thing I do quite a bit of is I will just very quickly jump to the right settings, go to 3D. Oh, look, we lost a seat. Things go wrong. And I might sit here and say, and again, now that I'm working on my own, not with a full office, I can very quickly just do something like that.
Be right back.
Right? And then you get a 3D. The idea though is this thing is well enough modeled, accurately enough modeled, that I can literally show them anything I need to. I forgot to turn the lights on. But you get the idea of what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you said that you had these two small projects that were a little bit more developed just in terms of the working drawings, but you had the other larger project that you were in process on, but would be more interesting architecturally.
Yeah. So that's this project. This is a house that we're doing in Studio City on a street called Valley Heart. So it's larger. It's definitely larger. It's a corner property. It's a large piece of property. It's a 2.5 size lot. So we did a lot of work laying it out and deciding where we wanted to look. Across the street is the river. And then the whole lot is surrounded by trees. So in working with my wife and talking about, since we're not the client, talking about how to break the house up. We kind of wanted a wing for the kids. I have two kids. One is 20 and one is 16. They're both musicians. And they're both very loud, which is wonderful. I love music. I love hearing it, unless I'm trying to think about what I'm doing right now. And we wanted our area to be separate. So this is, we're not through design development almost, but you can see, I don't need to walk you through the whole house, but it's broken up. You enter on a corner, you have your public area, and it gets more private where my office will be. And then when you go upstairs, you have our area and you have the kids area over here with a break in the middle. I'm playing with finishes and massing and volume right now, so I do a lot of this. There we go. Let me get back outside. So, and this is really how I do a lot of my design work. I start looking at something from down here. I move up and look around. Say, well, you know what? I really think this should be, this thing here should be this material. You know, no, I want to go back. I do a lot of that. I'm right now playing with this roof height because I want to bring light into a hallway. And believe it or not, this is design development. It looks like construction document because I was trying to figure out dimensions. But I do model this much as I go. I think about things like when I cut a section, let me grab another section. Hang on one second. And I've got my floor framing. I also want to look at the floor framing of a deck or a patio or a balcony or something. And I don't think I have one that shows that right now. I haven't worked on it. Let's see. There we go. So I'll work on laying them out on this. And I look at things.
Can you zoom in on the wall section that's sort of in the middle area? Yeah.
Here?
Yeah, so I just want to see how far you've modeled up to this point, you know, between one wall and the slab and the next.
Yeah.
So
It's
you
a
don't
full
have,
composite.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you don't have any framing, you're not doing complex profiles, but you are doing, having all of the skins intersect.
Yeah, this is part of me being a hybrid. All the skins are there, they're accurate. I tend to, particularly at this point, I would, if I had to do a section and show it, I would quickly throw on the 2D bits from your template. So I throw in the, you know, the double top plate, the sill plate. I need to work on learning more about complex profiles that are stretchable and scalable in multiple directions, so that I could really have a good wall where I could slide headers up and down or double sill plates up and down. But this is the level of complexity right now. It's, so if you zoom in on this, there's difference in the walls. This is wood siding with a rain screen and then zip, and then, you know, the 2x6 and then insulation. Then up here it's stucco with a rain screen. And the floors right now, I'm actually laying in the flooring on top of the floors because it changes so much. Again, that's from your template also.
Right, so you have a structural floor with the sheathing, and then you have on top of it tile or carpet or whatever.
Yeah, like that right there. That's a separate finished floor slab laid on top of the flooring.
Right. So this is, you said this is design development right now, and you're.
But even in that, at design development, this is the beauty of the system. The sheets are starting, right? The notes, everyone has their own notes, but the sheets are starting. They're starting to fill out as I work, right? Even getting into reflected ceiling with different graphic overrides. Exterior elevations, right?
Oh no, this is interesting. Just pause for a moment. So you are, in order to really highlight the different planes, here you're putting a fill with a wash behind it. That's
Yeah,
very,
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, that's because it is one thing to just have, well, to have certain vectorial hatching, like the upper one, if we look at it, well, actually either one, you've got the siding showing, and then the walls behind that. Well, we don't know. Is there no siding, or is it that you've hidden it because it's in the distance? But by putting the wash behind that, so you're
No,
doing that. Are you doing that in the view, or are you doing that on the layout sheet?
it's on the view.
Okay, so just can you open up that view and let's just see
It's
that?
literally a fill. All of my elevations and sections they fill up the width of the page basically,
Mhm.
so that I have room to put everything in there. And then I can change this depending on you know, you could drag this over and you can change the color, you can do whatever you want. But it does give you the feeling in this situation of what the foreground is and what I want you to look at with the rest in the background.
Okay, and let me just point out for those of you who are watching who are a little like, how does he do that? So in the fill tool, you of course can put a variety of different options to cover an area. One of the options is a radial fill and another is a linear shading. And when you do that, you have the option to say it's at one color in one place and it changes to another color in another place. So that little vector line, when he moves it, you can see how that's changing from the highest density of the color to perhaps pure white or no fill
No fill. Yeah.
beyond that. So that's a very interesting way to just highlight what you want to show on that particular drawing. And that's on a layer that you just turn on and off. So what layer is that?
By the time I'm done building it, the building will be opaque and it'll just become a background, but on the plans, it looks like a gray background.
Mhm.
So I haven't taken them off. I've been leaving them on recently.
Hmm.
They change. So let's take a look at that elevation. Here's the north elevation. I also present the elevations with color, right? They're the exact same marker. They just have different graphic overrides. And again, this lets the client start to get an idea. In this case, it was let my wife start to get an idea for the different materials. Um, and the sky stays the same, but when I print it, the sky will go gray. So that's this elevation here. I use the shadows also, and that helps us take this flat drawing and really punch it up so people see the depth.
Mhm. Okay, let's see if there are any questions or comments here. So how do you output hard copy? And I'm not sure whether that question relates to, well, it's from 3 minutes ago. So that was from Tom Markunis. So do you print just on a large format, plotters like has been traditional, or are you doing more small format things and digital?
I'm almost all digital, all PDFs, and my print service when I need to have drawings, whether it's to go over something with the client or for the city, what used to be blue printers, they just print them out for me very quickly now. I will say I'm doing more BIMX models on the large iPad, and I'll sit with the client and walk through it, or I'll send them the BIMX file so they can walk through the house on their own. They can tap on plans and look at those. So I use that a lot also. It's a lot of electronic and digital.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. So the fill that you put in, the question, and at first I thought it was cut out, at least in the ones that had a more dramatic change, focusing the eye on one area. It looked at first, if you go back to one of the elevations, it had that. Yeah, it looked at first like the blue was cut out around the foreground area, but actually now I'm seeing that in this case, you were doing it what do you call it, just by changing the tonality in that area. So it is not precisely cut around, but you could have a fill that literally just was cut. You know, you can add more polygon points and so that way you could make the background washed out, but bring the other things to the.
There's another aspect to that also, I think. I may be wrong, but let me just check. When you go to the marker, let me turn the marker on. Marker elevation. I'm prescribing where the mark distance is. So the question is, if I push that back further, and we can explain what mark distance is in a second, will that change the appearance? And it should, right? So as long as when you should I explain mark distance?
Go ahead. I mean, I'll be interested in hearing your perspective on it.
Oh, my perspective is on an elevation, there's this, you know, when we drew by hand, the things that were closer, I profiled with fatter lines so they popped out. And then you drew lighter and lighter lines as you went back. If you just handed this to somebody to look at and you didn't have the shadows turned on, it's very hard to tell the depth of what you're looking at. I mean, you can tell that this wall here is in front of the green wall because it cuts off the door and it steps out. But without these shadows, it's very hard to tell. So the mark depth, and I'll go to the plan view to explain it. Here's my elevation marker up here, and I'm showing the entire building pretty much. This is the end of it. The mark depth allows me to say anything beyond this point I can treat differently. Okay, so I've pulled it back now, and that face that was brown again should now be translucent or transparent. And if I change that setting, I could make it fill all of that with white, and so the blue would disappear behind it.
If you have it as transparent, that's the other trick there. So can you right click just in empty space here and do elevation settings? So by right clicking in the view and choosing elevation settings, we can see the setting that is on that marker, which might be the same for other markers, but there's the mark distant area is checked. And then the option that fill uncut surfaces in the distant area filled with nothing. So that's translucent, transparent, showing that fill. So the fill is literally behind everything.
Right, but if I came in and I said, fill it all with the screen, right? That should change it. Now that still gives you the mark distance, right? I can still tell that that stuff is in the background and that this part of the building is closer. So, okay. All right.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I think that clarifies. So when you turn on mark distance with the little checkbox, then your marker on the plan has an option or has an extra line that you can then adjust. If you don't have it turned on, then that intermediate line is not visible. Now, the one limitation is it's just a straight line. In other words, you can't zigzag around things. So it's a little limited there. But other than that, well, actually, no, did they change it? Ah, okay. So that's something in recent versions that they did change. So you can zigzag it if that would be helpful for clarity. Now, by the way, Steve Cribble has a point that the gradient fill that you used, which is great, you need to, when you're using the fill tool, can you just highlight the fill tool for a second on the side? Yeah. So when you select the fill tool, there, and you have to deselect whatever's selected. There you go. In the fill pattern to the left of empty fill, press down there. So there are 4 choices for fills. The first one is graphic fill. That means it's purely graphic, do whatever you want. Then the second one is a cover fill. The third one is a cut fill. And the fourth one is a building material. These change what options are available, and that gradient fills that we were just looking at are only available in the graphic fill because they're purely a graphic, let's say, they're purely graphic. They don't represent real materials.
So here they are right here. And what he's saying is that if we go over here to this, they shouldn't be there, right?
Yeah.
They're gone. Gradient fills are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
thank you
cover.
for pointing that out. Okay, so let's take some questions here because this is good to have a little break from you demonstrating, and let's just go back and forth. So there were a few questions and comments about the what do you call it, the Magic Plan and other options. So let's just pause for a moment. So Ann Calendar says, I'm using a Matterport camera. I'm not sure what that does, but that's apparently would have some options there. Dan Wyckoff says, I'm using an app called Canvas, which uses their own laser scanner attached to an iPad. So that's another alternative. And Calendar says, the Matterport camera does a 3D scan of the space, same camera used by realtors for 3D tours. The wonderful thing is you can explore the space over and over to look at ceilings, lightings, trim, etc. But it costs about $4,000, I guess, for the camera. So I guess you can visit the space and then later review it because you're getting a full 3D scan. So that's very powerful. And I imagine that it can then export in a variety of ways, including perhaps point clouds, I'm guessing, because a point cloud is in ArchiCAD, it's not widely used, but you can bring in laser data that will just hover as dots in the 3D space. And then you can, of course, make sure your model matches the 3D dots, the real reality there. So Rich Matthews asked, in Magic Plan, how difficult is it to measure around furniture? And he said he's used it in the past, but found it difficult to find lower corner targets in many rooms.
Yes. They do allow you to measure up to the ceilings now. I'll be honest with you. Until I got the newest iPad Pro, I didn't even try measuring with it. I used it to draw. So I used my laser to measure, and it put it into the program of Magic Plan for me. So I would, put out a rectangular room, put the dimensions on, put any steps and changes, and place the windows. So a room might take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whereas with just the iPad, it takes 2 minutes. But the downside is you cannot see all the corners. If you can get one corner and see the floor, that's enough with the newest system that has the LiDAR on it. Because as you move around, it'll hold that line and tell you when you're on the same level when you get to the next corner. So if I shot 2 feet up on the corner, it would tell, and I found it, it draws the line. As I drop down, it joins that to the other one at the floor level. So it has a little artificial intelligence in there for us. I still prefer to measure those myself.
So this is using the latest iPad, which has, is it a LiDAR?
Yeah, the latest iPad Pro has a LiDAR, what's the term they use now? A sensor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Tony Darrow says, can you use the ceiling corners when using Magic Plans instead of the floor corners?
Yes, I believe the last version before this one, they started allowing it. I just haven't messed with it because in ceilings, if I look around this room, I've got cove, so I guess I can measure the bottom of the cove, but where's the real corner of the wall to the ceiling plane when I have a cove? So that gets in the way. So there is no perfect way. Certainly the scanners, Leica makes some great ones. And there's a new one, BLK to go, I think it's called. It's handheld, and it does that full mesh dot system that looks like a 3D photograph, although when you move in, it's just a series of dots. That doesn't translate beautifully back into ArchiCAD, but it at least lays it, as you said, Eric, behind as a reference for you to then build around.
Right. Okay. So David Yaguchi says, how long have you been using the SIP installation system, and are you happy with its installation quality and performance using stucco?
I'll let you know. It's literally brand new to me. I had taken a step away, and I came back and suddenly the codes had changed and I didn't have a clue. I was gone from practicing daily for 2 years when my dad died. And I came back and it had changed. Zip was there. It had been there before, but no one was paying attention to it. Exterior insulation is now mandatory in Los Angeles, if you look at the Type 5 sheet. So I will let you know. I'd be happy to let you know. It's going up on this new one. The builder was kicking and screaming. I said, find me another way to get this insulation in this wall. And he came back and said, okay, we'll use the zip, because the other options were more expensive. They kick and scream. I'll tell you what my hesitation was and then why they kick and scream. My hesitation was nailing. Nails and shear aren't, you don't want them to have space. You want them to be right, the head of the nail right up against what you're nailing it into. And if you put something like foam on the back of your shear wall and nail through it, now that nail has this 1 inch or 1.5 inch of foam between the back of the plywood and the stud that is nailing into. Now, LA City has approved it. They use 16 penny nails instead of 8 penny nails. And the nailing's a little different. I was nervous about zip for that reason. The builders are nervous because it's something new and you have to tape it, and to them that's extra work. But you've got a product that has insulation, moisture barrier, vapor barrier, and it's your shear. So I will let you know, Eric, and you can let them know how it turns out on this one project.
All right, great. By the way, David is in the LA area as well, so he would be affected. Now, by the way, you pronounced it as zip, but is it ZIP or SIP?
ZIP.
ZIP. Okay.
ZIP. And,
So
and the zip installation is called Zip R.
Okay. So I'm familiar with SIP for structural insulated panels, but ZIP is a particular variation of that?
Well, structural insulated panels are a full assembly. Zip is basically how to put your insulation, moisture, and vapor barrier on your exterior sheathing.
Okay. All right. So different.
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. So Dennis Hellier says, are you looking at twin motion?
I am. Absolutely. Isn't that the app that had the virtual reality, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
Was that twin motion? Yeah, so I am. I signed up for the class to learn about it, and I just didn't have time. So I will next chance I get, I will spend more time with it.
Yeah. So for those of you,
the movies are better. The movies are much better.
Yeah. So for those of you who, well, just give a little clarity and a tiny promotional notice, but very tiny. I recently produced a course with an architect named Peter Toohey teaching twin motion and the extension of twin motion, which would be going to VR, virtual reality goggles, the experience of like putting on these things and being able to really see things. So there's a course, VR for architects.com, that was just produced over the last month. All of the sessions were broadcast and are now in the member area. And if you'd like to learn how to use twin motion and really get beautiful results, and particularly not just technically beautiful, but ones that are emotional and impactful when you meet with clients, this is a great way to do it, because Peter is very experienced at not just the technical side of it, but he really uses it effectively as a marketing and design communication tool. So check out vrforarchitects.com. So Nathan says that you could do something for that boxes really quick, so I'm not quite sure. Okay, so I think that was related to the fill. Mark Wren says, is the fill tied to the elevation marker? So the fill is inside the elevation view.
Yeah.
So it's just drawn in there. It's not on the sheet, it's in the view. And the ability to see through the background stuff is based on the fact that the marked distance setting is turned on, and the option for making the distant elements basically just line work and nothing opaque is what Van was using. Nathan asked, do you always work with true pen weight off?
No, I go back and forth. In fact, right now, it is, it isn't on. I go back and forth. At this level, this is where I talked about my pens being lighter now. I've made them thinner. I even have a little lighter pen on the inside than the outside. Sometimes, particularly when you're working on details or getting in close on sections and elevations, having true line weight on makes it hard to see exactly where the points are to line up. I know they snap, but it just makes it hard to see. And my old man eyes need a little help, so I turn off the line weight.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Renee, I think Palavan asked, is limited distance view available for interior elevations? I don't think so. No, I think it's just interior elevations are simpler, obviously, and you generally don't have distant things that are too separated distance-wise. If you needed that, you could just use a section marker right. And basically create your own interior elevation using the other tool. It wouldn't be grouped as the interior elevations of one room, but you can get the graphics that way. Now Scott has some questions, Scott Bulmer, and I'm going to see if he has a microphone because this would be an interesting discussion to have. Let's see if I can open up Scott's line. Scott, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So Scott, let me just introduce you again briefly. Scott, you're an architect in LA, and we've worked together off and on, but quite a bit in the late 90s and 2000s. How are you doing?
Good. It's crazy times. How are you guys doing?
Crazy times, man.
Yeah, we're all dealing with it. Now, Scott, one of the time when we were really closely working together in the 2000s was when MasterTemplate was created, and so together, we put this together. Now let's see, it's giving me a complaint about my network connection, but we'll see. Just let's talk a little bit. You had a question about issue management, and we'll get to that in a moment, but let's just talk a little bit about what we did back then and what Van was working with. So the preset the views going to the layouts was something that was sort of theoretical, sort of like, well, you could save certain things ahead of time, but it was not a common thing that people were doing, where when you open up a template and you literally just draw a building, it's on the sheets. But this is something, Van, that you created, and before version 10, you would have your views, like these floor plans, these ceiling plans, these elevations, saved as quick views, and you would export them all into one folder as PlotMaker files, and then import them into the layout sheet. But the cool thing was you could easily, by doing it that way, you could easily just say, well, this is a new project, I'm putting it into this folder here. And this layout book, PlotMaker, will pick up its data from there. So that was just a brilliant insight.
It was necessity. All it took was my business partner once going, this is not the plan I'm working on. Why does it look like this? Okay, let me figure that out.
All right. Now, Scott, I'm sure you remember when we were first creating it, setting up all of those views and the layouts?
Oh, who could forget that? Yeah, fun times.
Yeah.
No, first of all, thanks, Van, for presenting. Everything looks so nice and crisp and accurate, which I'm sure the guys in the field appreciate. But yeah, like Eric, what you're saying is that ArchiCAD shipped. They suggested how it could be used, but it wasn't really properly set up. And then you had the wherewithal or the knowledge to make it a real deal. And so it was great to work together, and I learned a lot from you, and then I think we did something that everybody could use. And I'm so happy that you guys are taking it farther now.
Yeah, it's become a passion project as I keep tweaking it and trying to make it do as much as you can.
So I wanted to mention one thing. Van, I don't know if you do this or if anybody does this, but I found that like managing text in the model view was a problem. And so the only text that I would have in a model view would be like a window marker or like a linked label. And then I reserved all of my text to the layout sheets. And because it just was so much easier, or for me, it was easier to have a ceiling plan or floor plan or whatever, and not have to worry about where the text was, on what layer it was on. So on the layout sheets, I just put all text or even labels, not unlinked, labels that aren't linked to an element. I put all that information on the layout sheet, and that really has helped me go quicker. So, and I think we all want to go as quick as possible.
Well, you're a heretic, but I respect your independent streak there.
Well, the model to me, the model was the model, and that the text, unless the text was linked to a model element, then for me, it's quicker on the layout sheets. Anyway.
Okay. How do you approach it, Van?
Well, that would make me nervous. I love the comment. You're a heretic, and I respect it. I do. I know exactly where you're coming from, Scott, because it is the model. And sometimes when I make changes, like when this builder wanted to see a different type of insulation, I'm then going through all these views of the model that have different text on them, and I'm changing them. So I certainly see that as an issue. I will say that controlling the views is everything. You'll notice on this plan, I don't have text or dimensions for the bathroom or the kitchen, which is crazy, right? Because they don't know how to build it, unless you go to the kitchen view. And now I can start to put dimensions in. You see what it is, really. It's a blown up view with a white mask over the rest, or the, I call it the large view, the bathroom view, is the same thing. This is literally the model, but I have a layer for the enlarged, for what I call the bathroom view of this. And now I can add my 30-inch diameter circle. I could add my dimensions. I add my interior elevation marker, and it travels there, but the exact same view for the model, if you will, that you're talking about, doesn't have any of that on it. So I kind of go both ways on that. I try not to, the reason I don't want to add stuff to the layout for me is I might still move stuff around the layouts. I might still drag things and put them to different locations. So, I guess with details, you wouldn't do that. A detail is a drawing, is a drawing, is a drawing, but I may move stuff around, and then I have to remember to move the text with it.
That's correct.
Yeah, and again, the brain isn't as sharp as it used to be. If I have to remember to move text, I'm in trouble. But there is some wisdom to it, because this model is the model, as you said.
So you mentioned something that triggered something to me. So Eric, I added some layers that I use all the time that you guys probably would find useful. We do a lot of commercial projects also. So I added a layer just for ADA, I'm sorry, accessible stuff. And then like the circle as an example. And then also for travel distance in commercial buildings, you have to, show the distance to get out and so on. So that's a layer that I control with the unique travel distance layer. So,
right.
I mean, I've added some layers to the template. People that just do homes aren't going to care about the ADA, the travel distance stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. And so if you have to have a drawing that shows the travel distance, and so you're going to be showing certain things, you're going to show the walls and doors and other structural elements, and then you have a certain set of annotation that is specifically for that. Well, we have in MasterTemplate a layer group with the letter U as a prefix for unique. And so we basically have a layer that's uniquely on that particular layer combination or that particular drawing. So certainly the system that you set up, Scott, back then is easy to extend. You need these 2 or 3 additional drawings or whatever, style. You just create a new layer combination, and you, if necessary, create a new unique layer that shows on that. Is that essentially what you've done?
Correct. So like on an exiting plan, we probably have the, we'll most certainly have the zones on and then set to show the occupant, the number of occupants in the room, which you can set.
Yep.
So so it's an exiting plan that we would have. That would have the occupants in the room and then the travel distance layer on.
Okay.
That's a model view option to turn on the, to manipulate to display the number of occupants, so on.
Well, maybe I'll add this into the next master template. Maybe Scott, you and I can have an hour chat and see some of the enhancements you've done, because definitely want to keep on handling more and more different aspects of architectural practice like that. So we have some other questions. Actually, you did ask a question about issue management. So we want to bring that up.
Well, yeah, so Van, when you go through the different phases of the project, you want to talk about how you do your issue management? Like, your first set, like whatever, design set, and then you make changes, and then you're going to reissue the set.
Right.
So can we look at your title, the corner of your title block, and see how you display that?
That doesn't have any issue changes on it down here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm really old school. So it's different. It's different in schematic design to design development to interiors to construction documents. What I do for those is I have a single PLN file that's called whatever the client's name .pln. And when I'm done with my design, my schematic design, I duplicate that file and I take the new one and call it schematic, and I set it aside and I keep working on the old one. So I have archived schematic design, design development, and condocs for any after plan check for every project of PLN files.
That's
so
a great, I like that.
Yeah, so I can't mess them up because if I can, I will. Especially as you said, you want to move quickly, and that's why you do stuff in layouts. So I for that I do that. For issues, I struggle with it working the way I want it to. So I literally just change this date down here. That's it.
I see.
And because now when I do commercial, I did a spin studio, and I had to have a much bigger one of these to make up all the revisions. And in that case, I use this system that ArchiCAD has. The where is it? Right here. Yeah, book set. Is it book settings?
Yeah, yes, I think so.
Yeah. I use it for those, but for houses I don't. I just put a new date in the bottom. How about you?
Well, my partner makes a lot of changes, and then there's people bidding or whatever, and then unless we highlight from issued set to issued set, we need to highlight the changes and then document it up in the corner. So that's how we do it. But I like your idea. But the thing that we don't do well is that you will work on a set of plans, and then when major changes are made, I'll just add the date to the file name and start working on the next file. I like the way that you approach it, where you when you're done with schematic, you title that schematic, and then right away in the file name, what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we go to any one of these, they may not even be schematic, they may have dates. I have a permit one, I have a date on this one here, but the real one is the one that says .pln.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's always that. I do the same with my library. I have my own personal library parts, and when a new ArchiCAD comes in, I duplicate it, and I save the duplicate with version 22 for ArchiCAD 22, and the new one isn't called 23, it's just called and library parts for Architect Next Door. And it never changes. It's always that name. When I get a new one, I save the old one. So it's always the same name. I always felt the more you change the name, save as, the more you could corrupt.
Yeah, and then it takes longer to find files, or you know.
Yeah.
And no, I really like the naming convention that you're describing.
So, yeah, there's a couple of comments related to this. So Tom Palmer says we save PLA files for major issues. So certainly, you know, that's something you can always open up later and say, where were we at? What did we agree to? What did the contract have in it? Or what did the contractor see? Or, you know, what did we send to the city? Obviously, also PDF are good, you know, not easily editable. So sort of a record copy. So Mackenzie says, we've been rigging the change manager to set issues and keep a schedule in our title block that lists what day each set was exported. It also works really well to keep track of which sheets were issued when, instead of having to save multiple files with different dates. So using change manager there, which we don't have time to get into, you know, the demonstration, but basically ArchiCAD has some built-in tools for keeping track of issues and changes that you can manually keep track of, sort of make a note, this was changed, where you can put clouds and other graphics there.
Yeah, hey, I just want to mention, while we're just last point on this topic. So when we put clouds in the drawing, like let's say it's revision 1 and there's clouds on whatever sheets, I have a layer, then there's going to be revision 2 and revision 3. So I create a layer R. I have R layers for revisions. And so when you're going on to the next issue and you're going to have revision number 2, I take all the revision 1 markers that are on the revision 1 layer, turn that off, and then I have a revision 2 layer now. Because I don't know about you, Van, but when we issue the next set, we turn off the R1 revisions. You're only looking at the most current revision clouds, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. You just have to have a copy, hard copy or PDF somewhere to show what revision 1, revision 2, revision 3 look like. Because some builder is going to say, I didn't see revision 1. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to say on that topic.
Yeah, so there are a few questions that had to do with that enlarged, you had the enlarged bathroom plan or whatever. Can you just go back to that? Because I can, if you just bring it up, I'll just explain briefly the essence there. So people are asking, well, why don't you use just a different layer combination? Well, you are using a different layer combination. That layer combination includes things like the 30-inch diameter clearance there, and anything else that's specific to this enlarged view that's not shown on the main plan. And the white fill, can you just select that so we can just see what that is, where it extends?
Use it to block, oh, they're random. I use it to block out what's behind it. So if you, right?
So it just makes a clean background for that particular drawing. Because if you think about it, the drawing is part of a larger context, and you could show it just sort of with everything bleeding off. But sometimes it's just good to just have it all covered up so that you are cleanly cutting off the edges.
Yeah.
What layer is the mask on?
It's the same layer as all the details. I mean, all the dimensions. This one is on enlarged plan. But I created it. I added that layer.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I remember we used to do that for interior elevations as well.
Yes, we did. And that's what I was going to say. This comes from, the fact that we really like our interior elevations to be really clean, you know, really clean. They're just a rectangle and we don't see anything around that, right? And I could do this and you see more and it would be in the way. And that's what I try to do on the enlarged plans.
Okay. So let's see here. Saving PDFs with date and title. Yeah, that's a good
Yep.
suggestion for and
So these are
this
right here.
webinar will be uploaded. It's being recorded and everything, working out the way it should. Then you'll be able to watch and review this on my YouTube channel and on the ArchiCAD user website as well. So Rich says, I use the info box for auto text on different master layouts. It's good to show clients all the changes as we progress. I also have DR drafts, DA application, CC construction, etc. as revision number. Okay, so the auto text, using that feature can carry across important data. So we're at about 90 minutes. We have another half an hour if we have things to show. I imagine there's some things you haven't shown us, Van. Tell us what else there is that maybe you had expected we would get to.
It's more for me. The thing isn't so much about what to show. It's about why you show it. And I could spend. My business partner, when we first got ArchiCAD, would get mad at me because how long are you going to spend modeling that damn piece of that wall right there to get it right? And then we would cut a section and then a wall section, then we do a cutaway, and we didn't have to do anything. It was just all there. Then he said, "Oh, okay, so it took you an hour and a half to do that, but you did 6 drawings from that one thing." And so the dance for me with ArchiCAD is how much to model and how much not to. And it's not just about the graphics. It's not just about, let me back up and take a look at this again. It's not just about what does this thing look like, but it's how useful is it going to be for me to model, right? That's an interesting thing. Have you ever seen it lose openings, Eric?
Well, is that siding a separate wall?
But I do create openings and then, well, before I went to this version of it, there was an opening in that. I'll have to work that out. That's interesting.
And
But
you're using the new opening tool for,
Yep.
for
Yeah.
that.
So I can grab all the windows. Instead of doing a composite wall that has the siding, right? I can add the siding to my stucco wall. And I can, in some cases, that may go up 2.5 floors or 1.5 floor. And it's a beam that goes down forever, and I just cut it at the bottom. In this case, it's actually cut with, this is a question about how much do you model? It's actually cut with a 3D flashing.
Is the wood siding like a wall? Would you say that's a separate?
It's a beam.
You're using the beam tool in this case.
So turn the layer, is it on a separate layer?
It's on a 3D layer. I can turn it off.
Well, no. It might be the the intersection value might be wrong.
Well, it was right 2 hours ago when I looked at it. So something I did deleted the. You know what? It might have turned off. The view might have turned off the. Let's see if that's the case. Document. Model views. One of the things that's been added is openings. All right. There you go. The opening was just hidden.
Brilliant.
So, but this thing, if you look down at the bottom of this thing, there's actually flashing at the bottom of this. This beam is probably 15 feet tall. And let me see, section A. And it's so that I can use it on multiple projects. I just have one, I just drag it in. But there's a piece of flashing down here at the bottom of this thing that holds it in place. This one has actually been modified. It's not the case. I'm speaking without thinking. I did change it. But I will sometimes have these be over long. I set the top and they run down the bottom, and I just cut them with solid element operations. In this case, I wound up redoing this because I wanted to show it just like Hardy board for the sections, because the builder didn't understand it. I think I need a new builder. But you see in the detailing, I mean, in the modeling, I have, those are actual beams that when you do the blown up view, you don't have to, when you do the detail and cut through it, it's already there.
Okay, so you're choosing the beam tool for this siding rather than the wall tool. Is that any particular preference, just simpler to manage?
I just try not to put too many walls together because you run into problems sometimes with the intersections at corners, where a piece of one wall that's underneath shoots through, and it takes too much of my time to fix it. With beams, I don't run into that. But this piece here, this green piece that's highlighted, that's a complex profile or a composite. Let's see. It's a complex profile of a weed screed and a step flash.
Can you go to turn off true line weight and just go to hairline?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Okay, so now.
Yeah. They're fills and they're so close together to come by as a thick line, which is what I want in the drawing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to, for example, let me go to the sections. I have a blown up section. I know, Eric, I should have told him to not rebuild every time automatically. When you go to these and you zoom in, this is drawn in, this little flashing. But down here, this is not drawn in. This is it's a complex profile or profile manager piece that I put in there along with that piece of flashing, with that piece of siding. So I don't forget it. I don't forget about the waterproofing when I do the detail. It's there.
Can you select it? I just didn't. I was looking away. For you'll just select that.
This piece right here.
Oh, that piece.
Right.
Okay. What about the actual siding? Is that a?
Yeah, it's a profile. So let me open this up to the source view, and I will show you another thing on this. Here we go.
So those are actually set filled. Okay.
That's not the real. This is the real one. Yeah, there you go. I'll explain that in a second, why there's a real one and not a real one. So if I open this up, what this is it's got a flash at the top, which alignment is off. And then it's got a top piece of the siding, which is based upon Hardy's actual pieces. And this is one of their sidings. I could have it actually pulled away from the wall. It just becomes, when you simplify it, make the back flat, it renders a lot faster. It doesn't slow down the project. But this particular one also has flashing at the bottom, so that they show up in my blown up sections, either my wall sections or my details.
Okay. So yeah, as a note, if you were to have a different height, you would just create a different profile with a different number of repetitions of the boards.
Well, if it's the same board, what I would really do, if I want to change the material or a different height, I could, do a different one, right? On a different, and copy and paste. You can also, if you choose not to have a flash at the bottom, you can make this thing too long and then use solid element operations to cut the bottom. So I can make this 20 feet tall, right? And then cut the bottom either with the floor it's hitting or the flashing it's hitting.
Okay. There's a question from Michael Rabachev saying, if you do structural and framing plans, how do you show walls above and below in the same saved model view, or do you combine above and below walls in the layouts?
I don't show both. I'm old school on that, and in fact, I get confused when people try to show them both. Let me show you. I show the floor below.
You'll have to click don't save on that. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, great. Well, all right. Sorry.
So I think you put it back anyway. You put it back there.
So actually, it's easier if I just stick on the plan, right? Instead of coming here. So this shows both of them. I work with just the floor that the framing is sitting on. All right. So I do have a layer combination when I'm creating these structural plan showing background. So I can have the background walls. I can have the walls of this floor showing. Remember the openings? The openings are back and they're going crazy. But so this shows the floor below. And I show it because I want to show my columns and hold downs on this floor. When I'm drawing it and working on it, I may in fact, and do in fact, then use trace reference of the roof above. So I know that, okay, well, if I wanted to show rafter tail, I know it goes to here. Or when I'm putting in my ridge, I know it's right here because that's where it is. So I use the floor above as a reference while I'm working, but I draw on the floor below. Does that answer the question?
We'll see. I'll see if Michael has a comment on that. There was someone else who asked a question about structural. Oh, so Ricardo Lopez Sanchez says, how is your workflow with structural designer? So I guess talk a little bit about your work
with my engineer. I typically do all the structural drawings. So I will send to the designer PDF set, including a schematic framing plan that'll have headers, rafters, beams, ridge boards, girders, whatever there is called out, even my typical details that I use. I'll send them PDFs. I will send them DWGs of that also. And they'll use those to, typically for me, they check my structure sizes. He may send me some DWGs of details, but I typically want to draw them myself because no one sees the picture in 3D in the head the same way I do since I've created it. And I've been working with the same engineer for a long time, very smart guy, way smarter than I am. He'll still try to put, a beam through a space where there's a vaulted ceiling and not see it. So I tend to try to control that, but I send him DWGs and PDFs. He will mark them up and send them back to me. I have yet to work with someone who uses ArchiCAD as an engineer.
Just replying to one comment here. So one of the things when we talk about structural, apparently version 24 is going to have some improved workflow with structural engineers. I don't have any details. I'm not actually privy to anything, but I know that as of maybe is it July 8th, there's somewhere in the first half of July, there'll be a presentation Graphisoft is doing that'll be showcasing ArchiCAD and engineering working closely together. I imagine that's when they're going to be also talking about version 24 because there haven't been any official announcements there, but I'm guessing that there are some real developments that they've done. Steve Petita asks, is there a way to show the trace reference on a view in a layout so it prints in a light gray? There's no automatic way to say, hey, this view, which I'm currently looking at with certain active elements and certain another story or something else as a trace, I can't just put that whole thing over there. But whatever it is that you're using as a trace can be saved as a separate view and placed on the layout in the same position so that you have two drawings overlaid, and you can change the graphic appearance of it so that it is using a very light gray, for example, pen set. So it's similar to what Van did with the electrical plan, except that you could do anything. You could have the roof above, or you could have another story as a trace by essentially overlaying two drawings, and one of them change its pen set.
Well,
So,
on the, if I can add to that, unless I misunderstood the question, I can trace reference something on a layout. I just don't know if it'll stay. So I could say, I want to see the trace reference of my roof plan, right? Which should now be here somewhere. There it is, right? And then I can drag that over. You'd have to register it, basically. So you can, I'm just throwing it on, I'm not going to make it right. You can trace reference a view on a layout sheet. I just don't know if it stays.
well, that reference, so if you go to the trace and reference controls, like the little drop-down menu, that reference, where it says choose reference, we have to turn it on. You can see that where it says roof plan there, it'll remember the last whatever number for this particular layout that you used. So you can return to bring up something that you had previously done. And when you're outputting, if you go to the file menu and just do the print command, even though we won't actually print, and I believe it's also available in plot, but under print, you'll definitely see an option that says print reference. It's a little checkbox there. So that is a way to print to either PDF or, of course, to a printer with a reference. So, but it's not really part of the layout. It's just a reference on the layout, and it doesn't come from the original view directly. So it is something you can use, but use selectively.
I certainly tried it when I first noticed it. I placed my electrical, and I placed on the layout, I said, I want to see the view of the walls as a reference, trace reference. And it showed up and it looked great. Next time I came back, it had moved. So I stick to registering the two together.
Right. Okay. So that's certainly slightly more effort, but almost no more effort and much more reliable, which is to place two drawings, one of what would be the reference without a title. So you're not calling it out as a separate drawing, but with a different pen set. So that would be the way I would recommend doing it. So David Uguchi asks, what advantage do you see by doing your own structural drawings rather than just letting those generated by the engineer? Seems like a lot of extra work and liability.
Well, the engineer stamps them, I don't. So no liability. If you're doing homes, and again, I've got a different kind of mind. I grew up swinging a hammer. But if you're doing a home, there's nothing too complicated in a home that I don't understand. And again, I want control over that. I don't have to redline his drawings. He redlines mine. I go in and I say, this is my intention. I want this to be vaulted. I want this not to be. I want to use 4x6s here because of this. You can't put a big beam here because I've got ducting running through. Whatever the reason is, I'm in control of that, and he has to tell me otherwise. And that seems to work with me and I have two engineers I use. It seems to work with both of them. And it's the way I've always done it. In the old days, we did it by hand. He'd come down and lay flimsy over the drawings and say, what about this and that? And I would say, you can't do that because of this. And that's the reason. If I was doing larger commercial buildings, which I have done, I don't do it myself. They do it.
Mhm. So let's see other questions here. Okay, so in relationship to the showing the different stories and structural engineers always show both above and below walls. Otherwise, columns from above are not shown on final drawings. So that is an interesting point to avoid or to make sure that you're showing what you need to for structural support.
Well, again, that's our responsibility. So if you start at the roof with your ridge beam and go down, and when you start the next floor, whatever columns you had, you view those from below as you're working on them. So I'm drawing on the floor plan of the first floor for my roof framing, but I see what's above. So you're going to trace that all the way down. By the time you're done, you will have done that. I had a plan checker go nuts with me at City of LA saying I can't read these plans because the engineer had both the upper floor and the lower floor overlaid. He couldn't follow them. So that's really the reason I separate them. They're easier to read, but you do have to trace your loads down from the top down to the foundation.
Right. So anything else that you think would be interesting to take a look at?
Well, let's see. We did the 3D view thing. Hang on a second. Let me jump over to this guy. The other thing I want to encourage is different sets for different size jobs. Right now, everything I'm doing is single family. Everything I'm doing is single family, and most of them aren't as big. They're not a 5,000 square foot house. Most of them are 1,000 square foot addition, 750 square foot remodel, a second floor, but they're houses. So they're going to fit. But if you look at the plans for this little house, and you go to the little ADU, and you go to the floor plan sheet, I've got room to have some waterproofing details and a floor plan and a reflected ceiling plan and a roof plan and schedules. Whereas on something as large as a 5,000 square foot house, my plan sheet has room for barely a plan. And you'll even see this section marker. If you jump out to the floor plan view, there's the real section marker. This is just a screenshot of the section marker that allows me to, because I work in 24 by 36, I would not be able to fit that whole thing in here. My old business partner had a propensity for cluttering up a sheet. He loved to clutter up a sheet. And it used to drive me crazy because the more cluttered up it got, the less people could understand it in the field. So simplicity is what I'm after with these. So having different sets for your different types of jobs is really kind of important. If the same floor plan, it just needs a different size sheet or a different setup. So, on this one, I have to start developing my architectural details and pulling them on because I can't put them with my roof plan or my floor plan. So start thinking about that and have different sets for that. This particular template I'm using just has the one because I use it only for houses. But it's important because you can spend a lot of time playing with these. As organized as I am, I still have all of these over here on the right here that say TR. These are all recycling/trash. They're all layouts I've used and taken off. Sometimes I use it to store it. That's the other thing I wanted to say. Make sure your sheet index is a sheet index that updates automatically off of one of the views. If I decide it's time to do an interior sheet and I drag it in here, okay, now it's going to have to show here. And when I go to print it, it will, or it should. it should now show.
You have to rebuild it or refresh it.
There's
Good.
the interior. Okay. And so the trash/recycling is really important as far as keeping things there that you aren't using yet. Because I'm going to print a sheet to send out, and rather than have 7 different layout books or layout subsets, I have one, and I'll drag things in and out of it as I use it. Because everything numbers automatically, it doesn't matter. The only place it gets in the way is if I'm referring to a sheet in a note, where I say per sheet 8.07. I'd have to keep an eye on that, but keeping those separate. And the other thing I keep on here is I keep in my, I'm sure other people do it too, it's not all that genius, but I keep, just have to turn the layer on, huh? I keep my stamp in this thing that Eric created called special registration stamp with my signature on it. So I don't turn that on as long as I'm sending them in, but I haven't used a real stamp on a set of drawings in years. I just send it in with these, which is great. It's just less time. The worst thing in the world when I was first starting out was having an apartment building with 150 sheets, and I had to stamp and sign every one to go to the city, and there were 3 sets. This certainly makes it easier.
Let's just back up just for a second. So that sheet index and the trash recycling, I just want to make sure people who may be less familiar with that process. So first of all, in a layout book, you have subsets. The subsets allow you to number different groups of drawings or to group them. So you have structural drawings perhaps, or you have, the plans, the sections, the elevations in the 100 series, 200 series, etc. Now, even in a simple case like where you're doing here for your main set of drawings, just sequential. So you don't need to have hierarchy.
It's like the consulting and structural. And
you have
their own.
Okay.
Structural are all S's.
So the sheet index is a report of something in your project. And in this case, the index is reporting on layouts, and there's a criteria. Can you just open up the criteria for that sheet index?
I'm going to go to it right now.
And while you do that, so the criteria is basically going to say, what are we listing? Now, as what Van was mentioning was trash recycling. So something that Scott came up with early on that we discussed and said, yeah, it makes perfect sense, is to create a subset that is specifically for things you're not using, that you might want to toss away or you might want to use, so you get them out of sight. So it's just a subset that you can drag layouts into, or layouts from there into active use. And the sheet, the index settings, go to the index settings, Van. Yep. So it's basically saying the subset is whatever the job name. So in this case, it's listing only the sheets that are in that particular subset. This can be, we want these 6 subsets, but not these other 2, or it can be just a simple one. In this case, just it's within this main working subset. So the trash recycling is simply a subset, a folder, so to speak, in the layout book that is designated for things that you're not using. Rather than delete them, just get them out of sight.
And it's pulled out of the other subsets, so it's never going to try to publish it. Mm-hmm. So when I'm publishing, I select my subset that I want to publish and I publish it.
Right. Okay. So let's.
I did bring up one more thing to show on this one. It's interesting, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. When I talked about the zip versus other ways of insulating and shear, the builder, gave me the usual conversation of, am I the right one or not? Let me jump to the right one. Mm-hmm. Do you know what this costs? This is crazy. We have to do this. We have to do that. I was able to take my wall section and create 2 blank wall sections that I copied and pasted it into. And then in the layouts here it is, assembly options. I sent him a single sheet. Let me close these so we can see. A single sheet, and at the top it says, this is this assembly, this is this assembly, this is the other one, and these are the window details for those same assemblies. Only one of these is a live section, right? The others are drawings, where I took the live section and changed out the materials. Otherwise, I was going to be changing the composites, which I did at first. I was going to be changing the composites on the walls and cutting new sections or showing the sections. The problem became that when you have different materials, this assembly's got different materials than this assembly. Then all of a sudden your labels are changing. But this allowed me to create a sheet where, and if you look at these details, these are live details. Well, they're drawings, but my details have usually 3, 4, or 5 options on them. And I just crop to the one I want. So in this view, these 3 are all the same detail, just placed 3 times and slid over. And it allows you to run through variations for people, to get bids, to get cost estimates, to even do this with design issues for clients. They like to see things on paper. I don't as much.
Okay, so I can understand the idea of having multiple details within the same detail viewpoint and just cropping to show one that's relevant for that particular context. But the 3 sections, you're representing 3 different wall options. And are these actually in the model anywhere and just not noted? So you're saving.
I took my wall section that had the assembly I wanted, and I created 2 more identical sections that I hid, and then I converted those into drawings, and I just changed the assemblies. I just dragged, in this assembly, there's plywood over insulation, and in this assembly here, the insulation is, hang on over here, man. This one doesn't have it at all. So I took the insulation out. Some have the assembly over of the insulation over, some have it under. The labels are different. One of them has R13 insulation, one has R15 rock wool insulation to get the right ratings. So it was easier for me to just modify, in this case, the section rather than model it 3 times.
Okay, so the model actually then in this case where you're representing this wall section has not been updated?
Oh, the real one? Yeah, it's been updated. This is it right here.
Well, that's the one.
The other ones are drawings.
Right, okay, the others are 2D. So, but in the actual building, are those actually in use in some other walls, or are these just options?
No, they're just options of, so let me go to the floor plan. Okay. They're just options of this section right here, this wall section.
So
I just created 2 more that are on a hidden layer.
So this would basically be part of your design development where you're going to be choosing and getting, making a decision on a final wall section?
Yeah, now in most cases in design development, I might have actually just, because I have the wall assemblies, I might have just taken this one wall and broken it up and shown the 3 and cut the sections because I wouldn't have had to do anything. This was actually, after I made the decision based upon research, this was a builder saying, no, it's way too expensive. You got to show me some options. And he had a hard time understanding those 3D views. So these views, as cleanly as you can draw them, he was still saying I need more information. So I broke it down to those really jumbo wall sections, and that was the easiest way for me to do it. Had it been in the beginning that I was drawing the options, yes, I would have used 3 different walls.
Okay, so if it was actually 3 different sections of the building with different walls, you would have done it live, but in this case, it was just a quick way to communicate some variations. Okay.
Here are those roof sections I did in 3D. Those are different ones. So I do that sometimes, yes.
Okay. Now, there's a question of how do you store your details? Say we have three questions here we'll finish up with, and just we'll try to take the quick answers. How do
Okay.
you store your details? In other words, are they in your template and you bring them forward, frequently used details, or are they all cut live from your model? How do you import things like that? What about MEP? Do you model switches, lamps, etc., or are they just 2D symbols? And then a little bit about how you use zones. So those are three.
Okay, so first is the details. My details live in the template. I thought about having one PLN file that had all my details in it, and I refer to them. In the old days, I had a notebook with details. I would take them out, copy them onto sticky backs and sticky them down. The problem is that when I make a change to a detail, it then changes every drawing that references that detail, every file that references that detail. So by keeping them in the template, when I pull the template up, every template has my most commonly used structural, they start with STR, and waterproofing, they start with WTR details.
Can you just bring up a couple of them as you do this? Yep.
Yeah. So these are the window heads that we were looking at earlier, right? These are not live modeled to the building. These are drawn because this is taken right out of Marvin's catalog for their window assembly. I want to get as real as I can with that. Also, quite often you have to explode your details so people can see the lines of the different pieces, and that's not realistic. So I can't model that and draw it up. Structurally, things I use all the time, shear details, ridge details. I have a ridge board detail, I have a ridge beam detail. I think I drew that in 2005. I have stem wall details that we use over and over again. And many of these are also living on the layout sheets to begin with. So my typical structural sheet will have those. In elevations, quite often my template has the detail bubbles already there. I just drag them into place. So that's how I handle my details. I keep them as part of the template. And yes, I may make a change to one and have to remember to put it in the others. But the fact is that instead of opening a template file every time, I open my most recent file from that city with a new name, and I delete everything and start from that one. So I always have the newest stuff in every job that I start. That was the first question. Then there was a question about zones, and what was the other one?
About MEP, do you model switches, lamps, etc., or are they just 2D?
Yes. I model switches, lamps, etc. I always was doing 2D. I got Eric's template and the room template for residential that has the kitchen, has the switches and outlets modeled. And I realized this is fantastic. When I go to my interior elevations, my outlets are there, my switches are there. In my 3D views, they see them. I had a client say, can you turn that horizontally and tuck it down? I said, yeah, absolutely. They never would have asked me that question. It would have been in construction. They would have said, well, can you turn that? I said, well, yeah, now we got to turn all 100 of these. But yeah, we can do that. So I definitely model those. It's the exact same library part. You just turn on the 3D. Zones I use almost entirely for my room finish schedules. I started playing with them for the 3D purpose of, modeling, and it was too much work for me way back when. But I tie my properties to the zones. And I have standard zones for bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, living areas, so that here, I'll make this quick. F2. Let's go to the other project real fast. The zone for a bedroom, floor plans. Okay, and again, I just use my typical zone. So if you go to the zone for the bedroom and you open it up and go down to my classifications for room finish, there it is. Its default is a wood base with a wood floor, 5/8 inch Type X drywall, Wainscoting always says see elevations. I don't usually have wainscoting, but if there were, it would be there. And that's different than the typical bathroom zone, which has ceramic tile on a mortar bed, 5/8 inch green board. So that's my zones I use for two things. One, naming my rooms, and two, my room finish schedules.
Okay. And do you have favorites then for the zones?
Yes. Well, my zones, all of these zones here, living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, closet, all have preset what I normally put in those rooms for a house.
Okay, so when you just switch the zone category, that doesn't switch all those properties. So you must be using favorites then to have all the properties associated?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so great. Well, I think we've covered a lot. I know Rick says, how will you get all those details into version 24? Well, details are 2D. They're just part of the project structure. And when you migrate your, if you migrate a project or a template from one version of ArchiCAD into the next, it'll generally all be there. If you do want to start fresh, and certainly I provide a new version of MasterTemplate every year so that people can start fresh, then you have a choice. You can essentially get a new home and move all your furniture into it, which would be like copying all the contents of all of the details, etc. Or you can say, all right, there's some new features in the template or in 24, and I'm going to take my project or template forward and just add those new features. So now it's sort of a hybrid of a migrated project with some new paint, so to speak, as opposed to a new home where you're moving your furniture in. So there are two different ways.
Every so often that new thing you're moving into is so fancy and so different, you do really have to start over. But yeah, that's exactly the way I do it.
Yeah. So, well, Van and Scott, are you still on the line? Scott,
I'm here. Thanks,
okay.
Dan. That was great.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. So great to be in touch with both of you. Scott, I've had a little more contact with because I rely on him for some tech consulting when I'm upgrading MasterTemplate, and really appreciate the expertise that you bring to it. Van, this has been a treat to see your work and just to see the way you think, and I really appreciate your taking the time to help other ArchiCAD users by just sharing your work.
Thanks, Eric. It's really, it's a treat to be here. Great to see you, always. I wouldn't be where I am in architecture without you. So keep doing what you do. And I'm welcome to any and all input. I'm learning new things today, so this is good.
Okay, well, there were a few things we identified along the way that maybe I can talk to you about. I'm happy to spend a little time just helping you to optimize a few things that that could be changed. All right, well, thanks all for joining us. This recording should be able to be viewed probably in the next few days. I'll get it up on YouTube and on the ArchiCAD user website, and be back with more. And if any of you would like to volunteer to be grilled like this, you could see how mean and ruthless I was working with Van. LOL, anyway, if you'd like to share your work, I invite you to just contact me, email support@bobrow.com, say, hey, I have some things that I'm proud of, just things that you feel you've done well. I know that there are quite a few veterans out there who watch these things because you're always learning. And I remember, Van, you were saying before we got on today's call, you said, I'm just really getting back into it because I feel like I'm rusty, so here is someone who's been going 20 plus years with ArchiCAD, as well as 30, 40 years, in the business, and still learning. So
I'll tell you something my sensei taught me. I started jujitsu when I was 10, so it's been 48 years. And the belts go from white to color to black. Now my black belt is all white with a little bit of red at the end. So you circle back around to start learning again. So we can keep doing that in everything.
All right. Great way to think about it. Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Van. Goodbye for now.
Thanks,
Stay
Eric.
safe and be healthy.
You too.